Los Angeles is known as being the gang capital of the world, with many of the Blood and Crips gangs dating back to the 50s, and the Latino gangs dating back to as far as the 1920s. But in the 80s, a new wave of Asian gangs started popping up around Southern California, and Nguyen was there from the very beginning. Nguyen was born in Vietnam in 1973, during the Vietnam War. After the war ended in 1975, hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese fled their country due to the destruction left behind by the war. Tin and his family were one of the many who left. He and his parents and siblings boarded a cargo boat in 1979. The boat was overcrowded, packed with hundreds of people, all attempting to flee Vietnam. These boats were the only way for most people to leave at the time, but they were dangerous. Storms, disease, and starvation killed thousands of people at sea, and because the boats weren't made for long journeys, many of them were hijacked by pirates or sank in the middle of the ocean. Tin and his family survived the journey, and after weeks at sea and one plane ride, they made it to California. Tin was 6 years old. Tin's parents settled the family in Pomona, California, a city within Los Angeles County. Tin's family was one of the only Vietnamese families living in Pomona at the time, and Tin was the only Vietnamese kid in his class. Because of this, Tin was bullied every day at school. He would get beat up, jumped, and spit on. His classmates would call him racial slurs and yell for him to go back to Vietnam. And it wasn't just the kids igniting racial attacks. Store owners and neighbors would tell Tin and his family to go back to where they came from and accuse them of coming to America to steal from Americans. This type of treatment continued on for years, and Tin became an angry teenager because of it. And soon, his anger manifested into rage. At 14, Tin was introduced to gangs. It was 1987, and there were two main types of Asian gangs in California. There were the street gangs, which had very little organization, and usually consisted of a group of kids from the neighborhood that named themselves after their city or after Vietnamese pride. Gangs like the Santa Ana Boys and the V Boys were well known at the time. Then there were the organized crime type of gangs, like the Black Dragon and the Wa Ching. These types of gangs were highly structured and organized, and ran more similar to the Italian mafia. Tin's first step was into street gangs, but he didn't want to just join a gang. Tin wanted to start his own gang, so he got together with his boys from Pomona and they named themselves the Vietnamese Gangster Pomona V-Boys, or VNG. Now an active gang member, Tin dropped out of school and started committing crimes like breaking into arcade machines for money and stealing cars. This eventually led Tin to juvenile hall. Then 2 years after starting VNG, Tin was called upon by the Black Dragons, a gang heavily based in the Los Angeles area and comprised of Vietnamese and Chinese members. The Black Dragons were nothing like a street gang. Established in the 80s in Los Angeles, the Black Dragons were powerful, organized, and ran like a crime family. There was an ordered hierarchy, and gang members could move up the ranks and become made members. And at the age of 16, Tin became a Black Dragon member. Joining gave Tin a sense of power he'd never felt before. People started showing him the respect he'd always wanted. He was given a free pass to enter establishments and secret clubs that only Black Dragons were allowed to enter, and everywhere he went, people knew his name. Tin had went from being in fear to being the one people feared. Being in the Black Dragons meant Tin was no longer dealing in small crimes. The Black Dragons were involved in everything from drugs, extortion, and money laundering, to trafficking and prostitution. And by the time Tin was 22, he was involved in all of that too. Extortion and street robberies were at the top of the list, and Tin and his crew became known as the gang-banging side of the Black Dragons. But soon, Tin's gang-banging caught the attention of the LAPD. Tin was arrested on robbery and extortion and sentenced to 2 years at California's San Quentin prison. The whole time, Tin stayed loyal to the Black Dragons, both in and out of jail. He promoted the gang and would recruit Vietnamese teenagers to become a part of it. After being released from prison in 1996, Tin continued to put in work for his gang. But during one of his robbery attempts in San Jose, things went wrong when the jewelry importer Tin was attempting to rob fought back and was shot and killed during the struggle. After the shooting, Tin went on the run and was able to hide out for over a year. But in 1998, he was caught and arrested. At his trial, he received life without the possibility of parole at California's Pelican Bay. He was 26 years old. Tin's very first day at Pelican Bay, he was introduced to the prison's racial segregation system. He was shown the boundaries that lie between the white, black, Asian, and Mexican prisoners on the yard, and he learned of the invisible line for each group that should never be crossed. His job in prison became to only run with Asians and to never let anyone cross their line, and Tin did this for years. But in 2004, at the age of 32, something unexpected happened. Tin was taking a shower in the part of the showers marked as Asian territory when a group of Crip gang members surrounded him, claiming that that part of the shower was theirs. Feeling his life was about to end at that moment, he realized that they were all fighting over showers that didn't even belong to them, and that he was about to be killed because of it. Tin wasn't killed, but the incident gave him a revelation that he needed a change. Tin began to break away from the gang. He was introduced to Dr. Bidhan Chandra Roy, a professor of English literature at California State University, who encouraged him to work towards getting a BA degree, and Tin started taking college courses inside a prison. Tin also started to feel remorse for the man he'd shot and the man's family. In a 2018 interview with Dr. Roy for the online publication Boom California, Tin expressed the remorse he felt for the man he killed, saying, "How do I express my remorse and say I'm so sorry to a man whose life and future I took, to a family whom I've hurt? It's not enough." During the same interview with Dr. Roy, Tin also expressed his remorse in the physical form by lying face down in the middle of everyone on the prison yard, a traditional Vietnamese way of saying I'm sorry. By 2018, Tin had already spent over 20 years in prison, and because of his life sentence without the possibility of parole, he assumed he'd die there. But in 2019, California Governor Jerry Brown commuted his sentence, saying that Tin had made a complete transformation and that he had been rehabilitated while behind bars. That same year, Tin Nguyen walked out of prison. As soon as Tin walked out of prison, he dropped to his knees, thanking God for a second chance to do things better. But immediately after his release, Tin was detained by ICE, the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. Facing deportation, Tin was held in an ICE detention center for almost a year as they tried to figure out how they could deport him back to Vietnam. As of today, Tin continues to fight to remain in California. His story has made headline news all throughout the state, and he tells reporters if he's allowed to stay in the United States, he'll spend the rest of his life making amends. As far as the Black Dragons, the FBI says the gang is no longer the great crime family it once was. In 2005, after over 2 decades of being the most feared and ruthless Asian gang in LA, the Black Dragons were taken down by an FBI task force. The gang's top members were arrested, and each member was sentenced to more than 20 years in prison, ending the Black Dragons' power on the streets of Southern California.